He started to bang on the glass after a moment, my mind racing 1,000 miles an hour. Should I hide? Run? My phone was in the other room, and I was scared to take my eyes off the guy. I was sure he would break through the glass. Hello everyone, and welcome to BoredMaster. In today's video, we'll be exploring the Reddit page LetsNotMeet, where an OP narrowly escapes from being kidnapped by their Uber driver. But before we begin, be sure to hit the subscribe button to join our small but awesome community. Let's see if we can get to 50 subs. And help this video out by giving it a thumbs up. On to the video. This first post is titled, "It Could Have Ended Badly." So this happened in 2011, so the exact dialogue may have escaped my memory a bit, but the situation is something I'll never forget. Also, AIM was still pretty active during this time, and so was video chatting, think TinyChat. This is important for later. I was on an online dating site. I won't say which because I'll be dragged mercilessly in the comments, lol, and was talking to this guy. I was 31 at the time, he was 28. We talked for about 6 weeks before I gave him my phone number, and we took it offline to calling and texting for another couple of weeks. 2 months after our initial chat, we were texting and he told me that he was out having a few beers at a bar nearby my house. He asked what I was doing and asked if I wanted to come out, but I had a very long day at work and didn't feel like going to a bar. I'm also not a big drinker. I invited him over to my place. I know. After he finished at the bar and he accepted, I figured I would be okay since I do keep firearms for protection and know how to defend myself if needed. I also had a webcam. I took a shower so I wouldn't smell like a water buffalo on a hot day. The air went out at work. Put on some makeup and got dressed to wait. He then called and said he was outside of my house. I clicked record on my computer's webcam program and turned off my monitor and went to let him in. It's around 10 p.m. and he comes in and we go back to my bedroom because my living room was being remodeled. We're sitting on the bed chatting for about an hour, talking about everything under the sun. The conversation flowed. He was very handsome and so easy to be comfortable with. We got on the subject of firearms, and I showed him mine. About 15 minutes later, he asks for some water, so I go to the kitchen to get him a bottle. When I came back, he said he got a phone call and had to leave. After he left, I looked on my nightstand, where I put my firearm down after showing him, and noticed that it was gone. I looked everywhere for it, thinking I had put it down somewhere else. Nope, not there. I then played back the recording from my webcam program, and sure enough, it shows him grabbing it and putting it in his hoodie. I was terrified at that point. He knew where I lived. He had my firearm and he left his phone on my bed. Right then his phone rings and I answer it. Come to find out, he's married. His wife was calling him, wondering where he was. I told her everything, including the fact that he stole my firearm, and I had video evidence and was calling the police on him. Next thing I know, he's banging on my door, my firearm in his hand, asking me for his phone. The conversation went like this. Him, "I need my phone. Give me my phone." Me, not opening the door but yelling through the window, "Take the clip out of my firearm, empty the chamber, throw the clip into the bushes, the one in the chamber across the road, and put it on the ground." Him, "No, give me my phone." Me, "I'm on the phone with your wife at the moment, and I have you on video stealing from me." I put his wife on speaker. Wife, a whole bunch of expletives. Him, "Shocked Pikachu." He runs and gets in his car, then comes back. "I threw your gun in the ditch." At this point, I make him empty his pockets, take his pants off, take his hoodie off, and show me that he doesn't have my firearm on him. All the while, his wife is on the phone. I go outside and get in his car, in the driver's seat, and I tell him to take me to where he threw my firearm. He proceeds to tell me that I don't know how hard it is for him, being a felon, not being allowed to own a firearm ever because of a mistake he made. The mistake? Domestic violence involving a firearm. We get up the road. He tells me the firearm is there in the ditch. Then I realize the situation I'm in. I can get out of the car and go get it, leaving him to do whatever to me, if he chose. He was 6'4" and 225 pounds. Me, 5'3", 135 pounds at the time. Or I could make him go get it. taking a chance of him seriously hurting me. I took that chance, since I was on his phone with his wife and my phone with 911. He retrieves my firearm, brings it back to the car, and I drive back to my house and wait on the police. I get out of the car and he gets in the driver's seat. I'm still on the phone with the police. I walk around the back of his car to get his license plate number, and he just puts his car in reverse, hits me, and takes off. They found him later that evening. He still had the clip and the one in the chamber in his pocket, so now he's enjoying time in prison. So glad I never have to meet this person again. This next story is titled, I Escaped an Uber Kidnapper. Sigh. So after crying just a little bit after looking at crime scenes on the internet, I think it might be time to tell this story. It's just one of those moments when I randomly start thinking about it in a more serious mood than usual. It's going to be long. So this happened about 4 months ago now, maybe more, but I don't really know for sure. Anyways, I was 19 years old, I've turned 20 by now, mid-February, and was going home from university after classes. I usually take my keys with me, but around that time, I had lost them, and my mom was yet to take me to get a new copy. I remember I kept insisting, but she wouldn't listen. So what I did was knock on the door to get my younger brother's attention, so he'd come and let me in, but my mom also took his keys and just left him there, locked up as well. I asked my brother to pass me my charger from my room, and I called one of my aunties to see if I could go hang out at her workplace in the meantime. She said yes, and then told me to call an Uber that she'd be paying for as soon as I got there, and that's what I did. Now the Uber didn't pick me up exactly at home, it was in the house across the street instead. No special reason, it just did. The moment I saw the guy, he kind of gave me a weird vibe, but I also tend to be paranoid every time I so much as hop in a taxi. So I just got in, rolled down the window, and kept a grip on both of my phones. It all seemed relatively normal until we got to the area where my aunt's workplace was. This was a convenience store at her home in a housing. I think that's what you call it. When there's like a private division, I don't know, but condominiums didn't sound right. He just completely drove past it and claimed he was following the GPS when I asked him about it. But he wouldn't let me see said GPS. He seemed to know exactly where he was going now. I was kinda doomed from the beginning, 'cause I don't know directions, and I could only rely on the driver being a decent person and recognizing the area, which I did, but wherever he was taking me, I had no idea. I remember seeing this fountain that I could recognize from when Mom drove to my uncle's place, but that was like way farther away from my aunt's place. By now I was kinda thinking of what to do, 'cause this guy drove past a ton of empty housings, and a couple of them even seemed to still be under construction. Then he stopped near a place that looked like the end of civilization. We were literally on a hill, and then he turned off the car. I got lucky in so many ways looking back on it. My phone had no credit. As soon as I thought of that, my aunt called me and asked, "Where are you?" And I literally felt my heart drop, because I had no idea and this dude was just staring at me. I said I didn't know and asked him, "Hey, where did you take me?" And he replied, "I wouldn't know what to tell you, kid." That was enough for me. I grabbed my backpack and opened the door real quick with a loud, "That's fine, I'll see myself out," and hauled like I hadn't in a very long time. I remember even being afraid of carrying my backpack on the back, in case he'd chase me and pull on it, so I was holding it in my hand with my hoodie wrapped around my waist, as I thought of where to hide. I thought of knocking on someone's door, but for some reason, that didn't seem safe to me at the moment. I remember telling my aunt not to hang up, because he was still following me on the car. Then I saw an empty barren surrounded by concrete walls, and a strong bar gate, except there was enough space under the gate to crawl in. So I literally threw the backpack and then crawled under. There was a huge electric control box, and I opened it to crouch inside and hide. My aunt's still on the phone. She, my other aunt, and my uncle were all on a call with each other, putting credit on my phone and asking for my live location through WhatsApp, 'cause I had no idea where I was. Literally in the middle of nowhere. I waited there for like 2 hours and this guy wouldn't leave. I even had to go pee outside the box and immediately ran back inside. There were even tiny spiders and old honeycombs, so I was also fighting both my arachnophobia and trypophobia. At some point, I'm guessing the guy left, and my uncle got there in his truck. He didn't know where I was, so he kept honking and telling me to tell him when I could hear it closer. And then I finally did and got out. For a while I thought maybe this had been a misunderstanding, and I just jumped out of some guy's car like a maniac without even paying him. But then when I got home after staying at my aunt's pharmacy for a while until my mom, who still didn't know much about what had happened, picked me up, I checked the Uber app and not only did it say I had already paid, but it also said I made it to my destination, so I ruled that out. I had told my aunts not to tell Mom about it because she goes insane at the minor inconvenience, so telling her this would only freak her out and she wouldn't be any help. I only let her know when I called her to come get me and on her way to get a copy of that key, because of course something bad had to happen until she actually listened to me, and nowadays she always puts credit on my phone. Anyway, so that's what went down. I had to Indiana Jones that twice, and to this day, my family brags about how I was able to keep myself perfectly composed and react quickly, which I'm still shocked about. I remember seeing broken glass and metal bars laying around, and telling my aunt, if I'm going down, I'm taking him with me, in a joking manner because her blood sugar levels were her over. On our way home, my mom told me I wasn't in hysterics, because I was in shock and that it hit me the next day. It didn't. I kept going around as normal, but last week she brought it up again and asked if I didn't think I was gonna die. I said of course, but I also knew that freaking out would only either make me easier target or just not help at all anyway. When I remember it, more than scared, I feel angry. I could have been one of those many girls who just disappear and are later found out dead on a random hill or ditch. And I can't say I suffer survivor's guilt, because in all honesty, I don't. But I can't help but think, that could have been me, whenever another kid or teenager is on the news as missing or found dead. It really could have gone terribly wrong. My parents believed this guy was a rookie, who maybe felt sorry for me and let me go, because if he had wanted to, he could have hurt me with some sort of weapon, or just try to kill me right then and there. I don't even know anymore. I sent his profile to all the girls I know, so that if they ever happen to get him as their Uber driver, they can cancel. Since then, I don't take Ubers anymore. Wherever this guy is right now, I don't want to be ever again. Extra. I actually took pictures of the place where I was hiding until my uncle found me. I would attach them, but apparently, you can't post any sort of image in this community. This next story is titled, I was stalked for a month and had no clue. I walk to most places because, being severely visually impaired, obviously can't drive. I walk at night during summer, which lasts anywhere from April to October, if we're lucky. This is probably not the safest idea, but I'm from Texas, so temperatures of 100 degrees aren't unusual. One of my usual destinations was a convenience store a few blocks from my previous house. I set out one night normal to get myself some Pepsi and a candy stash. Our town isn't very big, and most people drive everywhere. It's very unusual to come across anyone else on my route to the store, but that night a man appeared out of nowhere and started talking like he knew me. He asked me where I was going, and I told him. It wasn't unusual for people to keep watch on me because hard of hearing blind girl with forearm crutches. This guy had no reason to be there and was walking way too close beside me. He asked me where I was going, and I told him, just in case I was overreacting. I sped up as much as I could since this part of the route is very dark, with only a subway that had closed for the night. He definitely wasn't there for a $5 footlong. I tried to appear calm, though the alarm bells were ringing, and I was shaking to the point I was afraid I'd drop a crutch, which was probably the worst thing that could happen right then, especially after he started asking what I liked in the bedroom, and he could easily have his way with me in the ditch, and no one would know. I felt sick, but continued my walk. The store was only about 20 yards away. I knew the guy that was on the graveyard shift. I got safely inside, and my friend handed me a bag to carry my stuff in until I was ready to check out. And when I got up to the register, he began speaking loudly enough that my ears hurt and I had to turn my hearing aids down, because it hurt my ears. "Hey, Sweets, did you ever find my 3DS? I played along, and he opened the half-door thing, and I sat on the stool like it was normal. Creepy dude came over and slammed his Bud Light and a 10 on the counter. After being handed his change, he went outside. He's still there, out by the ice machine. After about 20 minutes, he still hadn't left. My friend called his manager, and after explaining the situation, she told him to lock up and run me home. He did, and even walked me to my door. I got the key in the door, and we stepped inside. Catherine said to give you this. He handed a keychain and showed me how to lock and unlock the pepper spray. "Call us before you come from now on. He's come in after you for the last 4 weeks." He left, and I made sure every door and window was locked. So creepy dude, let's never meet again. This last post is titled, "My Dog's a Good Boy." Okay, I should start this story by giving a bit of background, so that you understand the situation a bit better. I, a 4'9", 16-year-old female at the time, had 2 dogs who were brothers from the same litter. Now, being boxers, they were relatively big and quite protective when need be. Vince was longer, much taller than his brother, and is usually the kind to sleep through a hurricane if we had one. His brother Mari was shorter, but more muscled, stronger. Usually these 2 were with me 24/7, as my mother used to work a lot, and I was usually alone most of the day, sometimes even until after dark. This never really bothered me. I'd been left alone at home like that since I was 11. It never struck me that I had a reason to be worried. One day that my mom was working later, I was doing some household chores, feeding the dogs, doing dishes, stuff like that. I continued doing what I always had, a routine of tidying the house I had done every day for years. As I went to take the trash out of the bin, I started walking towards the door when Mari stepped in front of me. I tried moving around him, telling him to get out of my way and sort, but he refused to budge. This was certainly odd, and looking back on it now a few years later, I realized he was probably trying to stop me from walking outside. We continued like this for a few moments, me trying to get past him and him, of course, never moving from his spot. He was quite heavy as a big dog. It was difficult to lift him and even harder to get him away from something. Now in the time we had been going back and forth with this interaction, Vince stayed happily asleep on his dog bed. I should note that from my kitchen, you can see the living room and bathroom. Usually we used the side door from the kitchen to enter and exit the house, since it attached to the carport. After a couple more minutes, I heard something I hadn't expected when I made one last desperate attempt to move Mari from his spot. He growled, which wasn't unusual as he had growled plenty in his life. What was unusual was that he growled at me. He had never done that before, not once. But for that reason, and that reason alone, I decided not to take the trash out that night. I simply tossed it in another room and left it be. A short time passed, maybe a half hour or so. I had gotten settled into my chair to watch some movies, while I waited on my mom to come home. While I was watching the movie, I suddenly heard a quiet knock at the side door. As I mentioned earlier, you can clearly see the living room from the kitchen, so I heard the knock pretty well. It was already after dark, so I figured it was just my mother. She had somehow forgotten her keys. I got up, went into the kitchen, and out of the corner of my eye I saw the hook near the door. The keys weren't there. To some people that's not a big deal, but to me it meant that the person knocking on my door was in fact not my mother. My mom is a bit of a routine-obsessed person, so if she actually had forgotten her keys, they would always be on the hook. I took a breath, preparing myself just to not answer the door, or if they didn't leave, to just tell them I wasn't interested in whatever was happening, and that they should leave. Thinking about it now, I really wish I hadn't even looked out the window on the door. I wish I had just sat back down, called my mom, and stayed out of sight. But of course, I walked in front of the door and immediately came face to face with a figure on the other side of the window. Now it was really dark, with just my neighbor's lights shining from his porch, so I could only make out a couple things on this guy. He was tall, me having to peer up at him through the window to look at his face. He had long hair that looked like a shadow over his shoulders in the dim light, but the only facial feature I could really see were his eyes. I wish I hadn't seen them. I could see the spark of interest flare in them as he perked up when he saw me. They were wide and staring down at me. He took a step towards my door, stepping up on the first of 2 steps. I heard him say something along the lines of, "My car broke down nearby. Could I come in and use your phone?" Immediately I thought of every bad thing that I had ever heard happening to a teenager, home alone, and tried to compose my nerves. I'm not sure what it was, but something told me not to trust this man standing on the other side of my door. I shouted back a quick no and an apology, hoping he was telling the truth and would just go to the next house over. But he didn't. Instead, he simply said it again, quite a bit louder. I thought for a quick moment he hadn't heard me, but then again, I know now that he most likely had. So I instead became a bit more confident. "I'm sorry, I can't help you. Go to the next house," I shouted louder. For a moment he paused, as if contemplating what to do. Then he knocked again, louder than the first time I'd heard it. My heart rate increased as I stared at him. When I didn't react, he started to loudly bang against the door. I took a step back, praying to whatever that he would either leave or my mom would be home early. I was usually a quiet girl, but my mom was a redneck with a raptor knife. She could take him. He started to bang on the glass after a moment, my mind racing 1,000 miles an hour. Should I hide? Run? My phone was in the other room, and I was scared to take my eyes off the guy. I was sure he would break through the glass. The banging was vibrating my eardrums, and apparently it was vibrating Mari's too. I saw him creeping up past the doorway, bending his head, teeth bared. He started to bark loudly. The guy stopped a moment, trying to see into the window at the floor where Mari stood. When he stopped barking, the guy mistakenly tried to jiggle the door handle. Now that's when Vince woke up. I swear, for a dog that was dead asleep 5 seconds prior, I'd never seen him move that fast. Ever. In only 2 seconds, Vince had his paws up on the door, growling like a hellhound at the devil's side at this man outside my home. The guy jumped, fell back, and bolted it. I heard him say something as he started to run, and saw another shadow. My mom came home shortly after I had sprinted across my carport to my neighbor's. We called the police after I explained what had happened, and my neighbor had dragged his shotgun out before they even got there. He had insisted on looking for the guy. The police had said someone tried to pick the lock on my front door, but there was a lot of stuff in front of it, and it was really old, so it didn't open anymore. I went to bed that night, uneasy, and so very thankful I had 2 dogs who were not only strong and big, but one that was vigilant, and one that could practically kill if you let him. A few weeks went by, and we hadn't heard from the cops, so eventually I stopped trying to think about it. Another month went by, and although I was a bit scared of being home alone, nothing else seemed to happen. Then we got another visit from the cops. What they told me made my heart sink in my chest, and still gives me chills to this day. They had caught the guys and realized they were stalking me. Yes, guys, plural. There were 2 guys that had apparently been stalking me without my knowledge for months. They had several photos of me, words they had written over them, awful words. The police had been fairly adamant that I change my locks, since they caught 2 guys and there was evidence of a third. We moved shortly after that. I still pass by that house sometimes when I go to visit friends or do stuff around that area. A chill runs down my spine every time I do. To think that they never caught one of the guys was scary enough. The fact they tried to break into my house was worse, not to mention that I hadn't even known they were watching me. I still think about it even now a few years later. I dread what would have happened if my dogs weren't there, and I dread even worse about what they had planned to do if I had opened the door or they had successfully broken in. I suppose they weren't expecting my dogs, since our backyard is fenced and they mostly stayed indoors, since it was so hot where I lived. I thank the universe every day that I had them, especially now. My mom never worked until after dark again after that, which in all honesty was fine with me. So to the man they still haven't caught, let's not meet. Thanks again for listening. If you liked this video, be sure to check out the others on my channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on next week's episode. I'll see you in the next one.